What if an ancient civilization spoke through your body? I talked to channeler Jessica Taylor, and she's able to channel these Palladians and still has somewhat of a normal life, raising 3 kids. Let's find out how this voice helps the world and helps society. Here we go. I have a big component about sensibilities and being able to understand our sensibilities and predetermine humanity. Because we can predetermine that stuff, believe it or not.
Do you mean through kind of projected programming and projected consciousness?
Alignment.
Yeah.
It's alignment. We're not aligning the kids the right way. So if you understand creation, I wrote a book about this. If you understand creation and you understand the 4 pillars of creation, if you align the human in the correct direction, their direction for success, their direction for money, their directions for health, you're going to eliminate the bad customer and you're going to eliminate the bad situations. Then all you have to do is prepare them for each situation through life, through their subconscious programming and what they may run into. But if their alignment is just like if you marry the wrong person, you put a square peg in a round hole, you may have a lot of trauma in that relationship. But if you're aligned correctly, you eliminate that trauma.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can also eliminate, if you're aligned to begin with, it can help to eliminate making that wrong choice to start with.
You have 2 barriers. We're not aligning based on people's birth date. We're not aligning based on their non-conscious. And science only uses 2 parts of law of attraction to determine answers for humanity. So even if you align, let's say we align the 4 pillars in the right direction, you have to put that alignment through those 3 laws of attraction. And basically the 3 laws are environment, foundation, and sensitivities. We only view it as a response to those 3 things. And that maybe that's done on purpose or whatever. But when we bring back the sensitivity part into law of attraction and feed the 4 pillars, align the 4 pillars and then feed that through that law of attraction, then that's perfect alignment for humanity.
Do you mean feeding the other aspects of that energy?
Well, what I'm saying is there's 3 laws.
Yeah.
Right. And if science is only using 2, based on the 2 laws that they have utilized and created narratives from in society, those 67% of law of attraction, right, has created the wrong realm of physics. So when they recognize the 3rd part and we align ourselves and use all 3, then we operate in the right realm of physics.
So what are the 4 pillars?
You have 4 pillars when you are born, right? There's 4 pillars. So if you take feng shui, and this is just me pulling different information from around the world to determine these answers. Can you see that?
Yeah, a little bit. I'll have to look it up later because it's kind of like the light back makes it difficult to see it.
Yeah, it's a compass. That compass
right, okay.
Is your direction? Is your 4 directions? Where are you at on the compass? Right? You can align just by our birth date alone. Before you even say word, we can align our non-conscious the right way. But then somebody said, what? How do you get the exact birth date? There's a mathematical deal that goes to your 64 DNA. So we can start at the 64 DNA and reverse engineer the 64 DNA back to the 4 pillars and know exactly what your birth date is to determine those answers for humanity.
Okay. I've heard a palmist as well. I can't remember his name. He was on an interview with Regina Meredith on Open Minds, but he says that the palmistry can also help to find some of that information because a lot of people, especially in the rural parts of India, have no idea what their date of birth is. They don't necessarily even know how old they are, but there is always ways that you can start to uncover that information.
When you hear the word channeler, people are like, what is that? What does that mean? What is a dumbed down definition of a channeler?
Essentially like the speaker for the radio, really. It's kind of about tuning into a different frequency in order for information, wisdom, different perspectives and guidance to come through from that frequency. So it gives you a perspective that is outside of the human experience because the human experience is very much led through the ego. Or even if you step outside of that, we jump in and out of ego self and the higher mind. So channeling or working with a channeler is a way to essentially move the ego aside for a while so that you can really get an idea of your path, your journey, your purpose without the ego coming and interfering in. Now, there's different channelers that will channel all different kinds of entities, channel sometimes just a higher consciousness. Some say that they're channeling directly from source, which is often used in healing. And I channel seventh dimensional Pleiadians.
Seventh dimensional Pleiadians. So you are speaking to them and you are bringing that voice to reality.
I don't speak to them. I step aside, basically. So I just let them come through me and other people will ask the questions. So a lot of my work is done in front of a live audience, or I do one-to-one sessions for people as well. So they'll just come in and ask the questions that they want to know. And it's like being in a dream state. When I come out of it, I don't remember much of it. If I listen, I always record the channeling. So when I listen back, I can then kind of recollect, oh yeah, I remember them talking about this, but I don't have very much memory of it. It is just like that kind of dream state. So, my body can still move. I'm not stuck rigid. I don't sound very different, but my kind of consciousness is removed from it in order for them to bring through that information without being interrupted by my consciousness, my individual perception of self and my ego.
How do you know the difference between a real channeler and someone who may be faking it? Because I've been around channelers and I just had this intuition that it just didn't seem authentic. I mean, what was your epiphany moment when this all started working for you?
I think it's different for different people. I think there will be some information that's channeled that will resonate hugely with one person and not with someone else. And that can be to do with the resonance of the recipient with either the channeler themselves or the entity or energy that is being channeled. When I first was really kind of on my spiritual path, when I first heard channeling, and it was from well-known channels, I just didn't kind of buy into it. I was like, oh no, it sounds a bit silly. It sounds a bit like they could be making that up. When my vibration changed and I became a lot more psychically in tune, or more that I was able to know and direct my psychic energy, then my perception of channeling changed completely. And that, in particular, that channel that I had been watching resonates hugely with me now. But it was just like I had to my consciousness had to catch up. It had to accept some of the ideas that were coming through. And that can be quite challenging sometimes, because some channelers will bring through things that are different to a lot of the information that we've previously received. And they explained it to me that one of the reasons for that is that channeling, whether you go back 2,000 years and you're talking about biblical works, or whether you're talking about 5 years ago, channeling will come through with in a resonance with the consciousness of humanity at the time. And of course, our consciousness is always evolving. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it goes backwards, but it's evolving and expanding, and we're taking in new ideas and able to understand new concepts. And therefore, there is a sense that certain things move through with the consciousness of humanity. So there are some things that I've heard certain channelers say that they've asked about, and the entities won't bring through that information because they basically say, at this point in time, this is not something that we want to expose you to, or that you're going to be able to accept easily. But in a few years in the future, we'll be able to talk about this readily. And I think we are getting access to more and more interesting new paradigms, new ideas, because our consciousness collectively is able to assimilate that kind of level of information. But certainly there are some people that don't feel genuine to you, and there are others who you're going to listen to and think, yeah, I get that, gosh, that really hits me at a kind of soul resonance level. Mm-hmm. Even if some of the ideas are a bit alien to you, or excuse the unintended drop in of alien there, but even if the concepts are challenging to your regular understanding or the paradigm that you're in, it may still resonate with you. And I think that is very much an individual kind of response and an individual choice.
I've always had this thought process in my head that everything is a fraction of source.
Yes.
And if everything is a fraction of source, they can never be strong as source. Now, if God has done this multiple times, where I've been told there's 53 ancient civilizations, and they've done this over and over and over again, because the structure, I came up with a structure of creation of four, that God created everything in fours, and the four corners of the world align and they put, we'll say Atlantis, in the middle of Earth. So you have four corners of the world, four quadrants, four rivers flowing in. Creation of four. What if they've done this same format over and over and over? And if you channel something or information, it could be a fraction of information from a different civilization, and they are pushing their agenda. How do we decipher? Because I think right now, this discovery mode, how do we decipher the right message and know what is the right message? Because I do think that some of these civilizations are trying to level up their own people, if you will, through the voice of humanity. Have you ever thought about that process?
Yes, I think that there's quite a lot to unpack there. Firstly, my understanding is, and this is from what I've received channeling, that the beings that I channel, or the predominant being that I channel, is another fraction of my soul's energy. So they've given me the kind of understanding, and other people will have different perspectives on this. You take what resonates, but they've given me the understanding that the beings that you're most easily able to tune into, i.e. channel or use as spirit guides, depending on, how you choose to work with that energy, are usually ones with whom you share a soul energy. So you're like a soul group. And they might seem very, very different, of course, being in a completely different star system, in a completely different frequency as well. But there is so when I first started channeling, the particular being I channel is called Kistos, and he works collectively with the seventh dimension of Pleiadian consciousness. And he will also give perspectives that are more individualized, because he's explained that he can move his perception more easily between the collective and the individual where he is. So when I first started working with him, he came through to me in meditation first, and we actually built up quite a relationship over maybe a year before he ever started to speak through me. It was like we had to get to know each other. I know that's not the same for everybody that channels, but that was how it worked for me. And so I started to build that kind of relationship of trust, feel that energy, bearing in mind I'd done several years previously of mediumship and development work, and learning to understand where there were malevolent entities or manipulative kind of energies or entities around that might be trying to come in. So I felt that that Kistos came through when I was ready, when I was strong enough to know that that was a genuine connection that was for the highest and greatest good, and that he was from a high vibration. I don't think that the beings that are channeled from the higher levels of frequency, so say the sort of 7th to the 12th, they're like the kind of highest, with the 13th being source energy, they don't have that aspect of wishing to control or be manipulative, because they understand that the raising of vibration for every single being or every single living energy or entity that is within the universe becomes for the good of all. So we're stepping out in Earth at the moment we're starting to learn, how to step out from a very individualized, separatist perspective to each other. We see ourselves as different to everybody else. Mm-hmm. But we're starting to move out of that and understand that there is some kind of unity or maybe some collective consciousness. With the Pleiadians and other beings that are in those higher dimensions, they understand that on a multi-galactic level, not just on the level of their beings with their own planet. Whereas the lower level energies and entities have a more individualized perspective of life and existence, like we do. And the ones that are lower will obviously feel almost instantly, you can feel the shift in the energy as it's so out of resonance with our own, and it doesn't feel good because it's not in. We're always drawn towards higher vibrational energies. So when something of a low vibration comes in, it naturally doesn't feel good, because we can tell at soul level that it's not for our optimum growth.
And the reason I say that, I interviewed this guy, R.L. Poole. He's been abducted since he was a kid. And has your guy ever talked about universal law? Right? Like, so if some of these ancient civilizations are breaking universal law to prod and jab and get specimens, because supposedly they're trying to figure out divinity, creation from God. If they break universal law, is that a problem? Have they ever mentioned anything like that to you?
They haven't spoken specifically about breaking universal law. And again, that depends on what people actually ask when I'm in that state. But what they have talked about, they've talked about abductions and different ET races that may be involved in those abductions. And they've said that some of the abductions, although they're often, in my understanding, they're carried out by the Greys, because the Greys are able to come into our resonance enough because they're not of such a high frequency, but they'll be set up to do that by some of the really high vibrational beings. And when they interfere, it's to upgrade sometimes the DNA, the length of the telomeres, to start introducing longer lifespans into the human experience, and other measures to help us to rise into higher consciousness. So it might do something that lifts the frequency of the being that's being abducted. And that means that when that person comes back and goes amongst humanity and is living their human experience, their frequency is actually a little bit higher, which lifts the collective. And I've spoken to people before that have had those abduction experiences, and they know it's happened, but they're always kind of chill about it. Like, oh, yeah, it didn't seem bad. I just am wondering what the hell's going on. Whereas when you're talking about interference in a way that is harmful, what they've explained to me about that is that's usually from star systems or individual beings. So there's multiple layers of frequency within every star system, right? So not every being that's in Draco is baddie. Not every being that's in Pleiades is good, because there are multiple layers of frequency. But those negative abductions are usually from those lower levels of vibration. And although that is because it's in the being's own self-interest, and usually the drive of that is the way that our scientists sometimes look at things here, where they're trying to find a scientific way to connect to spirituality or to connect to consciousness or to perceive something. So it's not really that different for them. They're trying to find out how we're able to learn to raise in vibration, because in the human experience, we have much more opportunity to go in either direction than some of the other dimensions, which seem to be a little more fixed. So those interferences, yes, they're not for the good of the person who has been abducted, and they are usually to do with understanding the human experience as a spirit in its spiritual concept mixed with our biology. Like, how does our biology come into it? Like, why is it so important that we have a human body? And we can go into that in a second. And that's what those ET beings are coming and doing. But what they have also explained about that is that at the point of incarnation, at the point where that spark comes out from God or source, whatever it is that you perceive it to be, that choice is made that that's going to happen during that incarnation, much like anything else that we go through. So at soul level, it's sort of been chosen because it still provides a level of growth to that individual and their perception of the human experience.
Well, that's a pretty good answer, because I've never heard that answer before.
They surprise me sometimes.
It sounds very genuine, sounds very authentic. I think that our scientists are not the sharpest tools in the shed. They're taking absolutes.
Yeah.
We're taking these absolute narratives and putting it on top of everything, expecting it to work.
Yeah.
That's why they'll never figure it out. One of my things is foundation. Right? Let's say you do what you do, and you're a guide, you're a fraction, right? You're a fraction of this journey that is a informational piece, an educational piece for multiple people if they don't know this part of creation, this part of spirituality. And I think the problem is there's nothing supporting all these people that have these fractions of information.
Yeah.
Right? So if we, I'm like, I want to come in here and create a foundation that aligns people. Because if you can align people the right way and people understand the foundation of humanity, and tone attracts tone, the right tone would come to you and seek help, because everybody is not the same tone, and there's going to be certain tones that are not going to work for you or with you to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I mean about there'll be certain channels who are in resonance for you and others who aren't. And a lot of the information that comes through to me through channeling, but also through meditation, right? It's not just channeling. It's something that I think we all have the innate ability to access. Just sometimes we've forgotten and have to be pointed in the right direction of how to reacquaint ourselves with our innate knowledge and our ability to connect to higher knowledge. But a lot of the information that they do bring through is stuff that's new to me, is stuff that I haven't previously perceived. And sometimes I'll listen back to a channeling and be really quite surprised, but it drops in a new level of understanding to so many different aspects. Like one of the main things, and this is probably going to be challenging to people that listen to this, and it was challenging to me when I first channeled on the information, because I used to practice conventional mediumship. So I'd, talk to someone's granny, tell them that she's come in to say hello and don't date that girl, she's wrong for you, kind of thing. And so I was very much in the world that spirits from the other side were coming in, and that was the entirety of the soul. And it was that whole soul that was speaking to the person that had passed on. But what they've explained to me is that essentially the part that is left behind is the egoic layer. It's the personality. So ego gets a bad rap. It's not always a bad thing. It's here to keep you in a human experience, and it's here to look after you and take care of you. Sometimes it can limit you because it doesn't always like change and growth. But it is essentially a lot of what makes up our personality, because a lot of our personality comes in through conditioning and programming until we maybe learn how to connect to something differently and shake some of that programming or reprogram ourselves in a more positive way. But that then becomes the personality. And so when someone has passed on and they come through, it's essentially still the personality. It's still that part, and that the rest of like the soul's energy, that essence, the being, the light, the divine spark that is within us, that goes on. That goes up to wherever you believe it goes up to, whichever realm. I believe it goes back into source energy and kind of recycles itself essentially. But that energy just continues, and it is when we experience things such as hauntings. And usually the hauntings have happened because of a trauma or, a death that has occurred in a very sudden way. So it has locked the personality into the dimension. But that's what we're able to connect with. But that part always kind of remains in the ether of our human dimension, which is why we're able to tune into it. Like you can tune into someone's deceased relative there's been no hauntings, no contact from them for 20 years, and they can pop through in session. That happens too. But essentially it is kind of the egoic part. It almost like a hologram of that person that pops through. But you can know that their source energy, their soul, their essence has gone to wherever it needs to go. Just sometimes, so if you do clearing work or exorcisms or house clearing and stuff, it's just a case of moving that extra layer that's holding on, so that it doesn't need to be fixed in a fixed state in a certain particular place. Like the personality, it doesn't need to still be within the human plane. It doesn't even still need to exist, essentially. It's just that often it's like everything that ever has been created, you can tune into its energy, because energy can't be created or destroyed.
I had an experience with a low-level entity that I removed from my cousin. He had a lot of trauma. And it taught me, and I did it unknowingly, and somehow I knew how to do that. And when I was in the situation, the only reason I was able to do it because he repeated what this thing was saying. So do you think these dimensions, these situations, we'll say situations that have been created, do you think it holds the soul back because God wants you to be perfect? This one person said they were 1,000 years old and I was more powerful and all this stuff. Got very offensive, looked like a mummy, and had a lot of control over my cousin until it was gone, because we were very standoffish the first 2 days after that. He was a completely different person.
Right.
Now, my understanding of low-level entities is if they're there, they're trying to get back Do you understand a pattern of them trying to get back? Are these pieces of the puzzle trying to catch back up with their soul and become whole again?
I think that those lower frequency energies, again, so going back to the idea when I channel the Pleiadians that Christos has said he's essentially another part of my soul energy. He's also said that you will have thousands of different parts of your soul energy incarnated through every layer of frequency and dimension, or maybe not everyone, but we will have thousands of them scattered in all different places. And they've also said sometimes there are aspects of your soul energy who are in the really low dimensions, and when they come through they seem really frightening to us because their vibration is just so different to the one that this part of our energy is incarnated into. That's not to say though that there aren't low energies and entities in that kind of low frequency that are nothing to do with your soul energy, and they like to kind of tune in as well. I don't think it's that common that we really have much interaction with the ones that are part of our own soul's energy, because generally we don't need to, and if we do, it's something that maybe just briefly needs to be healed and then we can move on from it. So I think there's also beings that come from other dimensions and energies that are made through human emotions, so egregores, who essentially piggyback onto us because our vibration is higher. So you are always drawn toward the vibration that is higher than your own. We always, and that seems to be a universal law. That's how I understand it. So every being will seek, even if they want to bring someone else down, but it's still an unconscious way of trying to draw themselves into a higher vibration. So we always gravitate towards something that's higher vibration. So when you get those energies jump in and cling on to somebody and don't let them go, sometimes, it's kind of sweet, really. They're just trying to lift their vibe up. They're just trying to do what we're trying to do, to ascend. But it seems very harmful to the person because obviously it can pull their energy back down. So you end up with this kind of jarring battle between the two frequencies because they're not in resonance. And anything that's not in resonance shouldn't be together. So it will always feel uncomfortable or feel bad. I mean, I've had a human ghost, jump right into me before, and I knew how to deal with it and got it to shift. But that's really uncommon. That's only ever happened once in my whole entire life, and I was pregnant at the time, and I think it makes you more susceptible to energies coming in. But that was a human spirit who, it turned out, doing some research afterwards, had been bricked up alive, and that's how that person had died. So they were trying to find a way out, trying to find a way to, that was the egoic layer, but it's still the energy is trying to piggyback onto something to take it out of the situation that it's in.
Yeah, it's a little different take because it's, when I understood the low level energies, I was like, that's hell. You know what I mean? That's, these entities that are still hanging around, that's hell. Because it's almost like, and I heard some guy say that he was in this, I guess, low level entities and had this dream or whatever it was, and he saw these people tied to trees, but the ropes were not tied. The ropes were just wrapped around them. They could leave any time,
right?
But they didn't leave. So it's a very interesting dynamic to see how do you clear these fractions of energy that have been associated with your life, and where is the tipping point of holding you back or letting you go? I think there is a tipping point.
I think that when your vibration changes, though, it makes it a lot harder for those energies to affect you because they essentially can't get to you. When you go past a certain point in resonance, you are too far out of the ballpark for them to be able to kind of cling on. But sometimes those, they're coming through, and they often come through to people that have got addictive problems, or the addictive problems happen because they have entity attachment. And people that do a lot of clearing work, that's often something that they'll work with. And people that can see low level entities, I've known some people who are very good seers particularly for that, will often see them caught onto people who are battling with their inner demons, right? That that expression isn't meaningless. And yeah, I think there are certainly times when I was going through the dark night of the soul and things were really bad and I was very, very anxious and in a state of fear. There were some times where I think that the thoughts that I had at the time were actually driven from entity attachment. But as I learned to move out of that state of vibration, then eventually they cleared themselves because they weren't able to remain attached to me, because I became so conscious of my own vibration and learned how to shift that. But like, when I say it's aspects of self, it's not, that doesn't take away the feeling of the malevolence with those entities sometimes. And I think quite often they are also ones that are separate from us as well, but in lower dimensions. So they could be in a lower frequency and also in a much more chaotic dimension.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, and I think there's a lot of people that have abilities that have attachments, because the way this thing spoke, right? It was like, I wasn't saying a word. And the only reason I was able to communicate was because my cousin could go into meditation, and then he would see this thing go in this room, and this thing was telling him it was his spirit guide. So they're full of shit.
Yeah.
They're full of shit, So they're talking shit, and they're telling me, like, John, you're in Curacao, because this happened in Curacao, and they're like, John, dive into your feelings. That's what you're here for. Love and light, love and light, love and light. So I think there has to be some understanding out there that I think there's people, I'm not saying you particularly, but I think there's people with abilities that have attachments, that are communicating with attachments, but they're dark attachments, and these people don't know it. That
could be such an individual thing. And sometimes I think there is some kind of purpose in these things happening. You see, we can be critical of people that are doing work that doesn't resonate with us. And there's been times where I've maybe been concerned about certain practices that I've seen come into spirituality. But I think if somebody who's on a spiritual path comes into contact with someone who is maybe working in that way, whether it's unawares or whether it's intentionally, they might go through a bit of a shit fight, but it can also be because their soul needed to learn that lesson. It needed to learn the lesson of discernment. It needed to learn how to connect with the gut feeling, with the intuition about a person. And a lot of us, when we come across somebody, whether their work, so that's what I mean by saying if their work resonates with you, it's going to feel right to you or not. And one of the best things that you can do is to start learning, firstly, just whether something does feel like it resonates with you or not, because that will give you the guidance as to whether this is a person that you should be working with, or whether it's someone that maybe is bringing in something that isn't going to like put you into love and light. And again, I think that's also the path of the person practicing, the path of the channeler or the psychic or whatever it is. If they have got entity attachment, ultimately it'll probably keep them held back, or they will end up, so on multiple occasions you see psychic mediums who have addictions, they have like problems like that because they're constantly working with people's emotion and trauma. So if you're working with people that have spirits that have passed over all the time, you're also working with humans who are still here in this realm who are very upset about that, and there'll often be a lot of emotion and trauma. And if the medium isn't clearing that stuff from their system all the time, they get sick, or they get addiction problems, or they end up just being less accurate with their work because it comes led by ego. So they feel like they've got to make something up. They've got to provide the service there on the spot. It doesn't always come. It does most of the time, but there are going to be times where you don't connect in the same way, And so I do see most things that are positive or negative at some level as being part of the required journey from the soul, what is actually needed for all the parties involved to learn from, which can be a hard pill to take sometimes. I've experienced that too, where I've not really wanted to accept that as truth because I'm like pissed off and I just want to get at somebody. Yeah. But ultimately, if I feel negative about something, it's probably because of something that isn't healed within me.
Well, I say to spiritual advisors, I think because this is such a new realm of truth and foundation and figuring out what is what and direction, there's ego in this space, in the spiritual space as well.
Yeah, big time.
And to me, I look at that and I'm kind of like, I have ego too. I want to be the best I can be and do the best I can do. But when you think about it, you're like, what is your foundation there? if you're just trying to, show your ability, what is pushing that narrative, because they say a true guru will sit in the corner and you never hear from them.
Yeah.
But maybe in this day of time, maybe that's the evolution of a guru. There's an evolution. It's a little different.
Yeah. There's so many of us getting so many different pieces of the puzzle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we can work collectively, when we can bring through our messages and discuss them, especially the points where we don't agree, because that's usually where the biggest breakthroughs come through. If you can listen to someone who's got a very different take on something, and you can talk about it long enough, or kind of connect into something higher and find out more about that, you often find a part that maybe you were missing. So working, when we can work collectively, that's always good. But yeah, egos definitely get in the way. And the thing is, at the moment, the human experience is still like 1 foot in the third dimension and 1 foot in the fifth. And some are hopping like even higher than that or even lower than that at times, depending on what's going on. But we are trying to bring ourselves out of a time where the narrative has been to clamber on top of each other, particularly from like the 1980s, where it was a real kind of hard chase, hard sell kind of environment. And a lot of us will have been either lived through that time or born in that time. And the energy of that is still carrying through. So we're trying to find, how can we be spiritual, make our living, get our message out there, and also still provide the stuff that at the moment is still part of the matrix, like the finances and the parts that we are still to somewhat kind of caught in the programming of that. And, maybe in some cases, in fact, probably in a lot of cases, there's going to be things within the spiritual community as well as the rest of the human community that are coming up for clearing, and they're coming up for healing. So you might see someone come up on a spirit, or, on Instagram, and they've got a spiritual platform, and you just think, oh my God, this is absolute bullshit. Maybe there is something that is being reflected to you about how you feel about your own value and your own worth, or maybe it is purely an egoic thing from them, and that they will have that come up to be healed at some point. And I think that over the next 2 years, especially, like for 26, 27, is going to see a lot of that density is going to be stripped away, and the chaos will eventually start to become clearer, particularly as we move into 27. And we might see that kind of egoic based thinking drops, partly because of the circumstances of our human experience might shift in a way that means that we're not always trying to, make the next buck. But also the consciousness is constantly transcending and moving into a higher state so that we can not be led with an egoic life.
Now, what do your kids think about Mom?
They don't really know much about it yet. Like my 2-year-old, he's got some really interesting past lives, which I saw when I was pregnant. And the eldest one, he is very psychic, and we saw that in him from before he could speak, and we could see that he was looking at energies around plants. And when he just started to talk, I'd say, what are you looking at? And he would say, oh, the lights, and point to them around plants or the cat or whatever. And he's interested in meditation, so he wants to learn meditation. He wants to, he's interested in Star Wars because of the Jedis and the kind of the principle behind energy, and that you can move stuff with energy. So he's that's probably as much as they've been immersed in it. But yeah, he's very sensitive, and we kind of yet to see where it goes with the 2-year-old, because his communication is just getting to that point where we can start to understand that more with him. But he doesn't seem as highly sensitive as the older one, who he just came in like full guns blazing, in like indigo, starseed, whatever.
Now, what does Dad do? Are you married?
No, we're separated, but
okay.
He's a chef.
Oh, okay.
He believes it all, but doesn't engage with it too much. But like in the kind of sense of awakening, he's very politically awake. We're very kind of on the same page with that kind of stuff. We were at quite a lot of the protests during the lockdowns and things like that.
It's very tough to have a relationship if someone has authentic abilities.
Yeah, and it requires both of you to do a lot of self-work in order to maintain your kind of connection together. But we have a good relationship and we co-parent, so our kids see a lot of both of us.
If you're in a relationship and one is here and the other one's over here,
yeah,
right, and you're trying to pick this one up, all the time. I mean, that creates a tough situation. She says, how about lineage? How about parents?
Yeah.
Do they have any abilities or?
Yeah, on both sides. My mum is very good at psychometry, so she can read through objects. There was someone else on the maternal side, not her mother, but I think my mum's aunt was very gifted at reading cards. She used to just read the old school, just read playing cards instead of tarot cards, and she was very accurate. And then on my dad's side, my grandfather used to have incredible premonitions from dreams, like train crashes, big global events, and they kind of scared him, so we didn't really talk about it. And he was of that generation where they weren't really open about that stuff. But he did tell my dad about it sometimes, because I think he knew that my dad was more open to it all. And he was also vehemently against any pharmaceutical products. He never took pills, never paracetamol, nothing ever throughout his life. And it was that, we don't know whether that was an intuitive thing or something that he found out. Unfortunately, he passed away before I had the chance to ask him that. And then my dad he can see and feel energy, and he recently had his first experience of out of body. So yeah, he's had a pretty cool experience there.
Now, was your grandfather a Viking?
Don't know what the lineage is when you go really far back. We've only kind of found, none of us have done the DNA things, not real keen on putting that on the database, but they're all very, very dark skinned, and the further back you go on the male side, like the more Indian actually everyone looks, but we don't know for sure where that comes from.
Well, I think it's Scandinavian is where that is from. You know, if you look at Scandinavians, old pictures of Scandinavians, they look like Native Americans. And I just think that I haven't figured this out, but I've met a lot of people that are Scandinavian. They engineered the world, and a lot of these people have these abilities. And I think their skin color changed as they got closer to the equator.
Yeah.
I think there's something to that. I really haven't got that totally figured out. I don't know if it's a fraction of Atlantis or, and that's where they were at. And then they, I don't know. But there is something to that.
Do you know Freddie Silver, the researcher? He's done quite a lot of work into tracing that in a physical sense, tracing it as much as he can do, and found connections with the Native Americans then up in Scotland on the remote isles in Scotland.
Yeah.
Over across to Scandinavia. And there seems to be this kind of mixture with people that were believed as being the Celts, but then they've also found that kind of, like you say, that Scandinavian structure connecting into Native America. And one of the, there's been a lot of discoveries of these giant bones as well in America and throughout Europe and things too. And in Sardinia, there's been loads of those skeletons found in Sardinia, and the local people claim that the bones are from Pleiadians, that they are beings from the Seven Sisters, and that's what these skeletons are. And they all carry the O negative blood group, which I have also. But there seems to be, and a lot of those ancient skeletons found in these different places have that blood group. So there seems to be some kind of thing trickling through.
I was told my bloodline was from John the Baptist. My discovery was that the same crew with the same bloodline created each of the 4 quadrants of Earth. And the only reason they were able to do that was because they could teleport from one quadrant to the other. So that would explain why this special bloodline would be in places we don't understand.
Yes. And the John the Baptist, that's a whole nother rabbit hole in itself, that he carried, was he the one that actually carried a lot of the power and a lot of the energy that would...
That's what Debbie told me. She says I was John the Baptist soul group. I was either John the Baptist or there at that time and in his soul group.
Yeah.
So whatever that means.
Yeah.
But me growing up in North Carolina and now understanding the Blue Ridge Mountains and then having these discoveries of, this look of this Mesopotamian, human being. Egypt didn't come here. They couldn't have come here that fast. You know what I'm saying? I think it was just the same people that created, created humanity. We're I'll say the same flesh gods, because I believe God is energy. The same flesh gods created these parts of the world, these 4 quadrants. obviously there's more information we'll uncover, but I think if we start aligning, creating this foundation for people, and we start aligning people the right way, I think we'll start to see more answers.
Yeah.
Once people align better.
That's what's so exciting, to be able to have these conversations and bring these different pieces together, because it's like one massive picture. No one person has every single piece.
100%. Can you tap in now? How did you tap in? Does it take a long time to tap into the channel?
No, not really. It just takes a minute or two for them to come through.
Do you want to try to do it?
When you finish speaking to them, just ask them to bring me back. They'll speak when they're here. Very interesting conversation that you are having. We are able to understand some of it through the energy that comes through at the time, and we are very intrigued to know what it is that you wish to ask us.
What do you think about my questions?
Do you have one in specific that you would like us to answer for you?
Can you read my energy and who I am?
We can feel this concept that you have of the 4 pillars, because we are greatly drawn to the middle point of that energy. And we feel that there is a soul group connected to the middle point of that energy, which we think is for you, that you have a connection to that middle point. That is a place of connection. So it is almost as though a portal has been created at the middle point of these 4 pillars, that you are able to bring through different ideas and also energies that will draw in more people who will have some of the answers for this part of your human experience. We can feel that there is different energies throughout several places on the earth, but in particular, as we speak to you, we can feel the draw to that central point. How strong your physical connection is with it. It is as though it pulls us to that point also. We think that is around possibly the Bermuda area. We have spoken through Jessica before about pyramids being underneath that point of the sea and affecting the magnetic field there, which is why sometimes there are mysterious disappearances of some of your crafts and energies. And we feel that that energy is connected to this part of your soul group and your bloodline. We cannot see specifically the history of who that person is and where they've been, but we can feel that the importance of your connection to that specific point. So it may be benevolent for you to go there. It may be a way of you being able to connect with the energy of that place, and therefore bring through some of that information about yourself and your other incarnations.
Well, I was told I was from Andromeda. I was a part of a special group in Andromeda and part of John the Baptist's soul group. And I had this information come through that God created everything by 4s in a linear process to the human body, which would be our pineal gland. And then that pineal gland, when you think about creation of 4, that pineal gland, that bone in our head has a 1/4 slant. So if you take the lines from the human body all the way to the 4 powers that God created the universe with, and we can align those lines the right way to create balance, that's where we got to get to. But right now, because of the unbalance from creation to the human body, right, we're not there. So the unbalance has created these situations that are problems for humanity, if you will. But it's very foundational, and it's very easy to determine the answer to get this right. It's just moving people in a collective manner for them to understand it.
A lot of humans are able to find the balance to align their energies by working through their own energy systems. But there are certain places throughout your planet that bring that into alignment more easily. And yes, working out how to bring humans into a state of an alignment, whether it is with their higher self and the guides that are able to bring through information for their human journey and experience, or whether it is moving them to physical places, does vary depending on the individual human. So some humans will be called to go very much to specific places, and that will help to activate the grid that moves across your planet, and it does move to some, it's a living energy, so it is not always completely fixed and stagnant. It's more like a kind of static spark. And some people are very much called to move to those places, and that is how they're able to find their connection with other beings in their soul group. And when they find those other beings in their soul group, then they often are invited to situations or given opportunities that move them physically to other points in the land that helps them to realign and balance themselves.
What is your name? Christoph. What is your number one purpose?
We choose to connect. So we know that Jessica has explained to you that I am an aspect of her own soul energy, and I connect in with the collective consciousness of this seventh dimension, which is much easier for us to do here, as we are not always in a fixed physical form. We are able to move in and out of a light body and connect telepathically to one another with ease. And we choose to come through because you are going through such a transformational time in your human story. And it is not only about this point in time, which we would like to just also point out is not linear. This is a construct that you create in order to have the human experience. It is very much real to you because it is necessary to be so. But we come through at this time because you are going through this shift from one frequency and hopping straight up into a higher vibration, into a higher frequency. Now, what is unusual about this, because it's not unusual for a collective on a planet to change their frequency, but what is unusual is the way that there appears to be resistance by so many to move into this higher frequency. And so we are waiting to see whether the predictions that have been made by some of your humans in the past, that there will be a split between the two, is going to come to pass or not. We hope not, because although it's not going to cause any specific harm, it also would mean that those who choose to stay in a lower dimension are not able to move up into a higher vibration. And it is that higher vibration that creates energy for the universe to expand itself and tune into higher power, higher knowledge, and remember that it is connected to source energy. And once you remember that connection to source energy, you also want to become a part in creating more of that energy. You want to become a part of that consciousness because you remember that it is you and it is where you came from. So it is a great missed opportunity for those if they do not move up through into that dimension. And also it is a missed opportunity for the whole of everything that lives, everything that exists, whether it is in a solid incarnate form or whether it is in a light body and just in energy. We are all expanded by the growth of others. And this is why some of the low-level entities also wish to, they are gravitating towards higher vibrations, although they do not have a conscious awareness as to why that is the case for them. So we come through at this time when you are going through this transformational moment because we wish to bring any information through that we can to you to help you better understand what you are, where you came from, that you are indeed a spark of source, so that you may choose to make that transition into a higher frequency. It is not a selfless undertaking on our part because we expand and we grow through your expansion and growth also.
So are the Palladians an ancient civilization created by God?
To explain this further, we will need to explain it in a non-linear sense because we do not experience linearity in the way that you do until it is to connect and observe civilizations where linearity is the prevailing model of the civilization. So we all come from source energy. If you imagine that there are 12 layers and that the 13th layer is that source energy, and it essentially encircles all of you, everything that can be, it sends out a pulse of energy or a spark, and there, from that spark, disperses that energy through the 12 layers of dimension. And there will be multiple sparks in multiple layers of frequency in multiple dimensions, and that will be that your soul group. So your soul group is the one that came from the same initial spark as you, and there are thousands of sparks or billions of sparks, numbers that you probably don't even have yet, going off at the same time, and they move through to create experiences. So yes, we are an ancient civilization, as in the collective that I am communicating with and to bring through this knowledge for you. But we are just in a certain frequency within the Pleiadian constellation. And there are many Pleiadians who reside in different frequencies. We will experience some of the forms on our planet in the same way, but there will also be aspects of our planet that we perceive that those in different frequencies and dimensions don't. So, for example, for your Earth plane, many of you will be able to perceive fairies or angels. They are other aspects of energies that have incarnated onto the Earth planet, but they have incarnated into different dimensions or different frequencies on the Earth planet. So we have an ancient civilization here. It would predate by hundreds of thousands of years your civilization. And in fact, one of the most civilized points that you have been was 700,000 years ago. And then there were alterations made to some of your DNA structure as you move through into a different cycle of lower vibration. But you have been in those states where you have been able to be much more attuned to and able to communicate with beings in higher vibrations and higher frequencies. So for every place where there is existence, which is everywhere, there are multiple parts of energy that are active in multiple layers.
Interesting. Can you read anything from me at all?
We can see the Andromeda connection, and there is not that many. There are not that many of you who have the Andromeda connection. And again, there's few who chose to have. So the reason there is not that many is because there are few who chose to have incarnations in both Earth and Andromeda at the same time. So essentially that is what it is for you. You will perceive it as possibly previously existing in Andromeda, but because of the non-linearity aspect of time, you have shot out and experienced at the same time, but you perceive it differently. The Andromedan aspects of you will not perceive the same separateness from you as you perceive from them, and they will also not perceive time in the same way. So they will be able to tune into things that have happened previously for you and things that have yet to come for you, depending on which energetic trajectory you remain on. So they can act as wonderful guides for you because they are able to see the entirety of your human incarnation rather than seeing it in a fractal way. And the Andromedans they are generally in quite high frequency, around the 9th to 12th, and have a very specific mission to work with those humans that they have incarnated their soul energy with in order to bring through, of course, the higher vibrations and higher consciousness. But they have a way of being able to do this work. They bring it more structure, maybe. For as Pleiadians, we send out a lot of frequency, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of energy, and we help to create different vibrations. But the Andromedans have a good way of bringing that vibration and then making it practical to the human experience.
Interesting. Well, it's foundation, and I think that's what I have in my head is the foundation of giving everybody a foundation that sets them up for alignment, because we're looking at the end result, and we're not looking at where things started. So I think if we start looking at things where they begin and aligning there at the beginning, that's going to align all these other fractions that need to be aligned in the universe.
Yes, and this is often a concern of the Andromedans. The energy that is connected to them through their human counterparts is often very concerned with helping others to achieve that sense of alignment also.
Interesting. Well, it's very nice to meet you, and you can bring Jessica back anytime. Maybe we'll talk again.
Thank you very much. We have welcomed this opportunity to bring through our insights to you and hope that they will help you on your journey of raising consciousness amongst your human population. Hello.
Wow. That's pretty wild.
That's
pretty wild. He taught, I mean, he was talking a lot.
Yeah, it's never short.
Yeah, he was talking a lot. But what's weird is he recognized exactly what I've been saying about foundation is exactly, I guess, what's innate in me. I mean,
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting.
I can't wait to listen to what he said about it. He probably understands it better than I do.
Yeah, because he said, he said he feels like their group is being pulled to the center point of the 4 pillars.
That I could feel energetically. Occasionally, something that they're talking about, I'll feel a physical sensation. I could feel like this movement of everything being pulled into the center of something. So I wondered what was going on with that.
Yeah, which was very, very interesting because they were very intrigued about the 4 pillars.
Yeah.
And that alignment.
Or maybe they don't fully... Did they seem to understand it, or they want to know more about it?
Not completely. They just told me that dromedas, or whatever you want to call it. I just found this out a couple of days ago, and they told me that dromedas are looking to help humanity find alignment. Yeah. So it kind of supports everything I talk about.
Yeah. Oh, we should definitely go into that again one day. We could have a really long conversation about that.
Yeah, it's very powerful. There could be some very powerful, different level stuff that you may not see. You know, it's all because like when people do these interviews, I mean, what I talk about, I feel. You know, I talk about everything that I feel, everything that I do, you know. So I think if you can doing these interviews with someone that has something to be able to go back and forth, I think that's where more and more information can evolve.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's essentially what the channeling is. It's bringing in knowledge and perspective from something that we're not able to see here from where we are.
Yeah. And he agreed they're an ancient civilization. Now, he didn't talk about where they were at in the prongs of things because he said there's no time or whatever to represent that. But he did talk about everybody's within the 12. The 12, and I guess the 13th ring is creation, and everybody's within this 12 diagram.
This idea of 13 is something that has been coming up a lot. They've shown, I've seen, not through them, through meditation, a 13th chakra or an extra chakra where the womb is awakening in women that has been suppressed for a long time. They've also spoken about 13 and its significant, the way that in biblical terms, 13 is considered an unlucky number. And they were explaining that has basically kind of been created like that or given that misconception because it prevented people from connecting into the idea of 13. So just even the number of 13, the vibration of 13, if people focused and meditated on the idea of 13, it may awaken their awareness to source energy, to it being something different than the kind of regular narrative that was being told at the time. And I think Sarah Breskman Cosme has done quite a lot of work on the number 13 recently as well. It was one of those things that popped up after I'd been channeling on it, really focusing on 13. And then she also brought in something about the significance of children that have been born in 2013 and coming forward from that date with extra abilities and things too. So there's quite a lot to with that.
It's weird that they don't understand creation either.
They explain it to me that it can't be, that like there's essentially that kind of like we see it in layers going down like that, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, and the top is the source energy, but they've explained it's more like a ball and it goes sort of inwards to the middle. But they show me it in that structure because it's easier for us to perceive as humans. So you have like that top part and there's this pow and it sends it's like sifting flour, right? So you sift it from the top, from the 13th layer. And as it moves through each layer of frequency, like when you sift flour, it becomes more and more separated. So when it gets to like the first layer or the 0 point, it's total separation from all its other parts that it's connected to. But in the 12th dimension, it hasn't been separated that much. So the perception is more connected to all the other incarnations. So they've kind of explained that. And that essentially creation is something, this is where it blows my mind and I can't understand it in my human self, that the moment of creation of everything is constantly happening in one moment. So everything that we are going to experience is also happening now. But that's like some quantum mechanics stuff that I can, be told and relay when channeling. but I have trouble understanding it in its entirety, because obviously we are here having a human experience, experiencing everything in total linearity.
Yeah, that is something like, I can see the lines, from creation to humanity, but I don't know about the time thing.
Yeah.
That's not there yet. I mean, I think we'll figure it out. I think it'll click and we'll figure it out. But I think it's I should have asked him more about the linear thing, because he kept saying it's not linear, it's non-linear. But what does linear mean?
Yeah, and like in terms of us having history, I mean, it's such a far out concept, and every now and then I will get a drop in from them, or drop in often in meditation from a different set of beings, actually, that I can't channel them, they're too high frequency, but they drop in like little concepts, and it blows my mind for that time in meditation, and I can understand what they're saying then and there, but then trying to contextualize it in a more wakeful state is really difficult. And like, I think yesterday when I did the meditation group that I run, I got the drop in that everything is happening in multiple states at one time as well. So they were showing me like a particular event, but showing me multiple perceptions of the same event. And they were saying all of these things are existing in one time, but it depends on your perception. It depends on your vibration as to which reality you experience as being reality. So it's a bit of a mind bender.
Interesting. Huh. Wow. Well, I think it's been a great interview. I think we've put out some great information today. I mean, if someone wants to find you and hire you and study what you do, because I definitely think you're authentic, I think you're real.
Thank you.
That was a pretty real conversation that we just had. And where do we find Jessica Taylor?
So I have, you can book and arrange one-to-one channelings. I also run intuitive development so that you can maybe learn to do this stuff. The idea is to put you in that power so you can do it yourself. That's all through my website, which is jessicataylorintuitive.net. And all my social media handles are Jessica Taylor Intuitive. I am going to run a competition next week for a free one-to-one channeling. So look out for that. Follow me now, Jessica Taylor Intuitive, and you might stand a chance of getting a free channeling.
Awesome. Well, I thought it was pretty crazy. It's definitely an experience, and all this stuff is new to me, but I guess I'm asking the right questions. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. My name is John Edmonds Kozma, CEO of Bang Productions, owner of the TikTok Live Creator Network Agency, and host of the Unimpressed Podcast. Until next time.